Once again in the city of Denver, Indiana, a quiet suburban neighborhood, the calm was abruptly interrupted by the blaring sound of sirens. Police cars and an ambulance quickly arrived at the house at 782 Pine Street, where something terrible had happened. The scene was one of chaos. The living room was overturned, with furniture overturned and objects scattered across the floor. At the center of the disorder, the body of 45-year-old John Williams lay lifeless. His face was contorted into an expression of pain and surprise, his eyes fixed on the ceiling. Marks of struggle were evident, with bruises and cuts visible on his arms and face. Neighbors, attracted by the noise, began to gather outside, whispering among themselves, shocked and curious. What happened to John? Who could do something like that? Were questions that hung in the air. Detective Mark Johnson, a veteran with more than 20 years of experience, took the lead on the investigation. Upon entering the house, he immediately noticed the intensity of the fight that had taken place. John had not gone down without a fight, which indicated that the attacker was someone strong or desperate. While the forensic team examined the body and collected evidence, Detective Sarah Mitchell interviewed neighbors. Many of them described John as a respectable and reserved man, a successful businessman with a seemingly perfect family. He lived there with his wife, Lisa, and his stepson, 20-year-old Michael Thompson. Nothing on the surface suggested that something so horrible could happen in that house. It was during one of these interviews that a neighbor mentioned something peculiar. That night, he heard screams coming from the Williams house. It wasn't unusual to hear light arguments, but this time was different. The screams were of terror and despair, followed by a disturbing silence. Shortly afterwards, he saw Michael leaving the house hurriedly, visibly distraught. This caught Detective Johnson's attention. He quickly ordered a team to be sent to locate Michael Thompson, who was now the main person of interest. Meanwhile, in the living room, experts found a small drop of blood that did not appear to be John's. It was possible that the attacker had also been injured during the fight. The search for Michael began immediately. He was not in the house, and his cell phone was turned off. Friends and family were contacted, but no one knew his whereabouts. Michael's mother, Lisa, was in shock and couldn't provide much useful information at that time. News of the murder quickly spread throughout the city, and the media began covering the case intensively. Everyone wanted to know what had happened in that apparently peaceful house. Who was Michael Thompson, and why had he run away? The questions were many, but the answers were still far from being found. As the night progressed, the pressure on the investigation team increased. They knew that finding Michael was crucial to understanding what had happened and solving the case. Detective Johnson, determined to uncover the truth, promised himself he would not rest until the person responsible for John Williams' death was found and brought to justice. Thus, the first piece of a dark puzzle began to fall into place, revealing a hidden secret that would shock the entire Denver community. The morning after the crime brought with it a frenzy of activity at the Denver police station. Detective Mark Johnson was sitting at his desk, reviewing notes from the previous night, when Detective Sarah Mitchell rushed in with new developments. She held a tear-stained envelope and appeared visibly shaken. "Mark, you need to see this," she said, handing over the envelope. Inside the envelope were a series of letters. They were love letters, written with a burning passion, but also with a tone of despair and guilt. The letters revealed a secret relationship between John Williams and his stepson, Michael Thompson. The discovery was shocking, but it explained many of the mysteries surrounding the case. John and Michael had been in a romantic relationship for months, hidden from everyone, especially Lisa. The letters described furtive encounters, fears of being discovered, and a deep emotional connection they shared. John wrote about his internal struggle, trying to balance his love for Michael and his role as husband and stepfather. Detectives realized that these letters could be the key to understanding what had happened the night of the crime. They decided to talk to Lisa again, this time with a different approach. When confronted with the letters, Lisa turned pale and broke down in tears. "I knew something was wrong, but I never imagined it," she said, between sobs. "I installed cameras in the house because I wanted to know what was going on. I saw them together." Lisa said that, after discovering the relationship, she confronted John. The discussion was heated and full of accusations. John tried to explain, but Lisa was inconsolable. Michael, who heard the fight, entered the room to defend John. The situation quickly spiraled out of control, leading to tragedy. With this new information, detectives reviewed the hidden camera footage. They showed intimate moments between John and Michael, confirming their secret relationship. There were also recordings from the night of the crime, showing the intense fight and, finally, Michael attacking John in an act of desperation. Meanwhile, the search for Michael continued. He had disappeared without a trace, and the police were committed to finding him. Michael's friends and acquaintances were questioned, but no one knew where he could be. The media continued to follow the case closely, and the Denver community was in a state of shock. At the police station, the investigation team worked tirelessly. Every clue was followed. Every detail was analyzed. Detective Johnson knew that finding Michael was crucial to not only solving the case, but also providing some sort of closure for Lisa and the community. However, the revelation of the secret relationship added a new layer of complexity to the case. It wasn't just a simple murder. It was a crime rooted in deep emotions and internal conflicts. The tragedy of John Williams and Michael Thompson was not just about a crime, but about a forbidden love that led to devastating consequences. With this new information, detectives redoubled their efforts to find Michael. They knew he was out there somewhere, possibly hurt and sorry. The truth about what happened that night was beginning to emerge, but there were still many unanswered questions. The once peaceful city of Denver was now at the center of a drama of love, betrayal, and murder. The revealed secret shocked everyone, but it also brought new determination to the investigation team. They were closer to the truth than ever, and they would not stop until justice was served for John Williams and his family. Lisa Williams sat in her living room, surrounded by the memories of a life that seemed to fall apart every day. Family photos that once brought comfort were now a painful reminder of his betrayal. The revelations in the letters had devastated Lisa, but at the same time, they had clarified many of her fears and suspicions. Months before the tragedy, Lisa began to notice subtle changes in her husband and son's behavior. John, usually meticulous and reserved, had become more distant and nervous. Michael, on the other hand, avoided eye contact and was always fidgety. Lisa initially attributed these changes to the stress of work and the typical pressures of everyday life. However, as time passed, the signs became impossible to ignore. One night, while John was away on a business trip, Lisa decided to talk to Michael about her concerns. Michael, taken by surprise, was visibly uncomfortable and avoided most of the questions, giving evasive answers. This only increased Lisa's distrust. She knew something was wrong, but she couldn't put her finger on it. Determined to uncover the truth, Lisa made a drastic decision. He bought small security cameras and installed them discreetly in various rooms of the house. She knew this could be an invasion of privacy, but her need to understand what was happening was stronger than her qualms. The following days were torment. Lisa reviewed the recordings every night, anxious and fearful of what she might find. For weeks, he found nothing out of the ordinary. John and Michael seemed to go about their lives normally. Lisa began to doubt herself, thinking that perhaps she was overreacting. Then one night, while reviewing the latest recordings, Lisa saw something that chilled her blood. John's office camera captured a conversation between him and Michael. The tone of voice, the words exchanged, and finally, the kiss that sealed the conversation left Lisa in a state of shock. The reality was far worse than anything she could have imagined. The pain of betrayal was overwhelming, but Lisa decided not to confront John immediately. Instead, she continued to monitor the cameras, looking for more evidence. She needed time to process the information and decide what to do. The next few weeks were pure emotional hell, with Lisa trying to act normal as her world fell apart. The situation reached a critical point when John realized something was wrong. He confronted Lisa about her distant and evasive behavior. The argument quickly escalated, and in a moment of fury, Lisa revealed that she knew about his relationship with Michael. John turned pale, and a fierce fight ensued. Michael, who was upstairs, heard the screams and ran downstairs to see what was happening. He tried to intervene, but the tension and anger in the room was palpable. The situation quickly spiraled out of control, culminating in the tragic night that led to John's death. With John dead and Michael missing, Lisa was left to deal with the fallout of it all. The guilt, pain, and betrayal were overwhelming. Every time she closed her eyes, she relived those terrible moments. The revelation of the forbidden relationship was a devastating blow, but it also brought a grim understanding of the events that led to John's tragic end. Now, with the police involved and Michael being sought, Lisa had to face not only her own pain, but also public scrutiny. The media was hungry for details, turning his personal tragedy into a national spectacle. While Lisa struggled to make sense of the chaos, Detectives Johnson and Mitchell continued their search for Michael. They knew he was out there somewhere, running away from guilt and fear. To solve the case and bring some form of justice, they needed to find Michael and hear his version of events. The city of Denver, still in shock from the revelations, anxiously awaited answers. The truth was slowly emerging, but there were still many mysteries to be solved. And at the center of it all, a distrustful and devastated mother tried to rebuild the fragments of her shattered life. The night of the crime was marked by increasing tension that hovered over the Williams home. The clock said 8 p.m. when John arrived home from work, later than usual. He was visibly tense, which didn't go unnoticed by Lisa, who was already sitting in the living room, waiting for him. Michael, on the other hand, was in his room, avoiding contact with both of them at all costs. John entered the room and found Lisa standing, with her arms crossed and a look that mixed anger and pain. He knew the night wouldn't end well. "We need to talk, John," Lisa said, her voice shaking with suppressed emotion. "Lisa, I can explain," John began, but was interrupted. "I saw everything. The cameras. I know about you and Michael," Lisa said, tears starting to roll down her face. John went pale. He knew there was no longer any way to hide the truth. Lisa's confession brought out all the repressed emotions. John tried to get closer, but Lisa backed away, her expression changing from sadness to fury. "How could you do this to me? To our family?" she screamed, her voice echoing through the house. Michael, hearing the screams, ran down the stairs. When he entered the room, he saw his parents in the middle of a heated fight. He tried to intervene, but the tension was palpable. "Please stop fighting," Michael begged, trying to put himself between the two. "Michael, stay out of this," John said, trying to remain calm. But it was too late. The situation quickly got out of control. Lisa, driven by anger and betrayal, pushed John, who tripped and fell against the coffee table, knocking it over. John stood up quickly, but the desperation in his eyes was evident. Michael, seeing the situation deteriorate, panicked. He knew he needed to do something to protect John, but the only thing he could think of was pushing Lisa away. "Stop, Mom. You're hurting him," Michael shouted, pushing Lisa harder than he intended. Lisa fell to the ground, and for a moment, time seemed to stop. John ran over to her, trying to help her up, but she pushed him away again. The situation was out of control, and fear gripped everyone in the room. It was then that Michael, in a moment of desperation, picked up a heavy object that was on the fireplace, an old iron chandelier. Without thinking about the consequences, he turned and hit John with all the strength he had. The impact was devastating. John fell to the ground, unconscious and bleeding. The silence that followed was deafening. Lisa, still on the ground, looked horrified at what Michael had done. Michael, realizing the gravity of his actions, dropped the candelabra and ran out of the house, tears streaming down his face. Lisa crawled over to John, trying to wake him up, but it was too late. He didn't respond, and the blood continued to spread across the floor. In shock, Lisa picked up the phone and called the police, her voice shaking as she described what had happened. Sirens soon broke the silence of the night, and the police arrived quickly. Detective Johnson was one of the first to enter the house, finding Lisa in shock next to John's body. He immediately realized that something terrible had happened, and the sight of the scene confirmed his worst fears. As paramedics tried unsuccessfully to revive John, detectives began questioning Lisa. She, still shaken, told everything she knew, including Michael's escape. The pieces of the puzzle began to fall into place, but there were still many unanswered questions. The search for Michael intensified. The police knew he was somewhere, possibly hiding and afraid. Detective Johnson, determined to find the truth, mobilized all available resources to locate Michael and bring him in for questioning. The tragedy of the night of the crime left the Williams home in ruins. Secret love, betrayal, and violence culminated in a night neither of them could forget. The Denver community, shocked by the revelations, eagerly awaited justice and answers. And so, the search for Michael Thompson continued, as the city tried to process the extent of the tragedy that had unfolded on a cold March night. The search for Michael Thompson continued. Denver police, led by detectives Mark Johnson and Sarah Mitchell, were committed to finding Michael. With each day that passed, the pressure increased. The media wouldn't let the case die, and the Denver community was in a state of shock and outrage. Investigations revealed that Michael had used money he saved to escape. Security cameras captured him at a bus station the morning after the crime, buying a ticket to a nearby city. Police tracked his movements, and it soon became clear that Michael was running far away, trying to escape the brutal reality he had created. Meanwhile, Lisa Williams was in something of an emotional limbo. She was still in shock, trying to deal with the loss of her husband and the reality of what her son had done. She collaborated with the police as much as she could, but her emotional state was unstable. Every interview, every question, made her relive the horrible night that destroyed her family. After days of relentless searching, a crucial clue emerged. Michael was seen in a small town in rural Colorado. He was staying in a cheap motel, using a fake name. Local police were alerted and, in a carefully planned operation, surrounded the motel. It was early morning when the police approached the room where Michael was staying. He was caught off guard, with no time to react. When detectives Johnson and Mitchell entered the room, they found a young man visibly shaken, with deep circles under his eyes and an expression of despair. Michael offered no resistance. He knew his escape had come to an end. Back in Denver, Michael was interrogated. Detectives wanted to understand what led him to commit such an act. Between tears and long silences, Michael told his version of events. He talked about his relationship with John, how guilty and confused he felt, and how the tension of that night caused him to act irrationally. He did not attempt to justify his actions, but his regret was evident. Michael's trial was a widely covered event in the media. The revelation of the secret relationship and the events leading up to the crime were discussed in detail. The defense argued that Michael was under extreme emotional and psychological stress, but the weight of the tragedy was too great to ignore. He was convicted of murder, receiving a sentence of several years in prison. Lisa, now alone, tried to rebuild her life. The Williams house, once a home full of memories, was now empty and silent. She struggled to make sense of the chaos, but every corner of the house was a painful reminder of what had happened. The tragedy left deep scars, not just on Lisa, but on the entire Denver community. While Michael served his sentence, he also sought redemption. He enrolled in rehabilitation and psychological support programs in prison, trying to find a way to deal with the guilt and pain that consumed him. Although he knew he could never undo what he did, he wanted to somehow find peace and perhaps, one day, seek his mother's forgiveness. Detectives Johnson and Mitchell, despite having solved the case, also bore the weight of the tragedy. They had seen the devastation up close and knew that justice, while necessary, did not erase the suffering. The Williams case was a grim reminder of human complexities and the tragic consequences that can arise from secrets and lies. Over time, the story of John, Lisa, and Michael Williams became a sad memory in the city of Denver. People moved on, but the shadow of crime still hung over the community. For Lisa, each day was a battle to find a new normal, while Michael faced the demons of his choices in his cell. And so, the Williams tragedy was etched into Denver's history, a painful reminder that secrets, no matter how well kept, always find a way to surface, bringing with them unpredictable and often devastating consequences.